fucking drone, bro.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
My gosh.
They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
Look at that thing, dude.
That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not.
That is the LNS, dude.
Well, if there's like...
Look at that thing.
It's rotating.
Echo 6-1 Tango Roger, over.
Oh, got it! Woohoo!
Roger, there's troubleshooting as soon as I get...
Did you box moving target?
02.
No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Wow, look at it fly!
To help them out.
Many of these pilots have hundreds, if not several thousands flying hours. It's not in their interest to make this stuff up because professionally it could be very damaging to them.
In 2015, Lieutenant Graves and Lieutenant Danny Acoyne were training to deploy to the Middle East.
What was the first thing you thought when you saw her? That actually is like, there is actually something there.
First time you see it on the radar could possibly be a false track, but then when you start to get multiple sensors reading the exact same thing, and then you get to see a display, that solidifies it for me.
Again and again, the pilots were capturing bizarre-shaped objects on their F-18's cameras. 2 of the videos would be released to the public. One would come to be known as Go Fast. The other was called Gimbal.
Really no distinct wings, no distinct tail, no distinct exhaust plume, much like you see in the gimbal video. It seemed like they were aware of our presence because they would actively move around us.
Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation, Friday, May 31st at 10 on History.
Earlier this month, it was revealed that the Department of Defense ran a $22 million effort to document and research UFOs. But is the Pentagon sitting on a trove of extraterrestrial evidence, or is this just the latest fuel for conspiracy theorists? UFO researcher and historian Richard Dolan joins us to deliver some insight into the government's so-called Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Richard, thank you so much for being with us. Now, for so long, the government has denied the existence of alien life, but now it seems they could be sitting on some evidence of alien life. So what can you tell us about this now defunct Pentagon program, and does it lend any credibility to the possible existence of alien life?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Paula. I think this is a very interesting development that's happened in this last month. It is true that the United States government for many years has completely denied any overt interest in what we would call UFOs. On the other hand, that's always been contradicted by a large body of declassified evidence that has come out by bits and bits since the 1970s through the Freedom of Information Act, which have, in many cases, shown that there have been lots and lots of military encounters with highly unconventional objects that just defy any kind of normal explanation. So this is a phenomenon that they know about. They just don't like talking about it because I don't think that they either don't have full answers and know what to tell us, or maybe they do have answers and they'd rather not tell us as well. This new program is interesting because it is an acknowledgement by the Pentagon itself, after investigation by New York Times journalists, of a program to study UFOs. And this goes right up into our own century. It was only shut down a few years ago. And they've had some very, very unusual cases that they, again, cannot explain. Just as in the 1950s and 60s, so too in the 21st century.
Unusual and fascinating. Now, much of the funding went to a billionaire friend of former Senator Harry Reid, Robert Bigelow. His company, Bigelow Aerospace, claims it recovered materials from, quote, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now, what can you tell us about Bigelow Aerospace and what it actually found?
Well, I'm very glad you're asking this question. It's an unusual one, and I'm not hearing it asked anywhere else in the media. but this was one of the little bombshells that came out in the New York Times piece a couple of weeks ago, that objects that were recovered from these encounters, or somehow UFOs have been recovered and studied. This is a claim that's been going for years and years and years, and the government would blandly just say, no, that's never happened, never happened. And suddenly now, boom, here's the acknowledgement that they've been doing it. What nobody knows, or at least what I don't know, is what Bigelow Aerospace has determined what these objects are. But they're a major company. Robert Bigelow has run this company for many, many years. He's been a defense contractor for a long time. He's clearly very well connected, and has personally indicated a strong interest in UFOs for a long, long time.
Now, one of the highlights of this recent fervor is footage from a Navy F-18 showing what has been described as, quote, aircraft surrounded by a glowing aura traveling at a high speed and rotating as it moves. Now, some could argue that this is just the latest in a series of these dubious UFO sightings. But in your expert opinion, is there anything different about this specific account?
Yes, I think it's very interesting. And I mean, look, when you look at some of these UFO videos on their own without context, it's easy to be dismissive of them and say, oh, well, that doesn't prove anything. But we have to look at everything in context. And this video was released by the Navy in connection with an incredibly fascinating UFO encounter. The Navy had not a particular object for 2 weeks before they actually sent a couple of F-18A Hornets to intercept. Those are top-of-the-line fighter jets, by the way, and who were completely outclassed by this object that people are able to see on video here. So it's quite interesting. That object had been tracked at an altitude of 80,000 feet, which is very high, dropping down to 20,000 feet, apparently quite easily, and then was seen either at the water level or below the water, making maneuvers that I think the pilot of the F-18A said, basically, I don't know what that is, but I want to fly it.
Wow. Richard Dolan, thank you so much for joining us to share your expertise on this fascinating subject. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
A mystery about strange flying objects spotted in the sky. 5 Navy pilots have come forward saying that they have had multiple mid-air encounters with high-flying, fast-moving objects. The Navy is investigating. ABC's Gio Benitez has the story.
New reporting on unidentified flying objects in our airspace. The New York Times speaking with 5 Navy pilots who've all said they've encountered UFOs during training missions up and down the East Coast. The pilots even noting that the objects were accelerating to hypersonic speed, making sudden stops and instantaneous turns, something beyond the physical limits of a human crew.
Clearly, this is nothing that we're used to seeing out there. We submitted a safety report saying that there was an unidentified object in our working space, and we don't know what to do.
This on the eve of a new History Channel series called Unidentified: Inside America's UFO Investigation.
The object then appears to accelerate rapidly.
The show chronicles a year-long investigation that includes former military intelligence officials speaking out on numerous reported encounters.
We trust the American people to know that there are certain countries that have nuclear warheads, and yet we don't trust the American people to know that there's something in our airspace that we don't know what it is.
Overnight, the Navy telling us that in recent years, there's been a number of reports of unauthorized and/or unidentified aircraft in our airspace, and therefore, they've implemented new steps to report further possible incidents.
Well, if you believe the truth is out there, then this was a bombshell, the unmasking of a secret Pentagon program to discover the truth about UFOs.
Yeah, so the multi-million-dollar program collected evidence like this.
Look at that thing, dude. Look at that thing. It's rotating.
2 Navy pilots can't believe what they're seeing as their F-18 fighter jets locked onto this bizarre shape, seemingly defying the laws of physics in the skies over San Diego. According to the New York Times, it was part of a $22 million program run by the Department of Defense to uncover the truth behind so-called flying saucers and other unexplained sightings. The program ended 5 years ago, and some people may find it ridiculous, but the journalist who broke the story says there are good reasons to study UFOs.
A disturbingly large number are not explained or explainable at this point, and that's what science has to look into seriously.
It's the kind of thing that draws in the true believers and the doubters, too.
There are people out there who believe something is going on, so they're going to be interested. But even those skeptics who think, I wonder if something's going on.
Something was going on here last year as the skies over Charlotte lit up with a series of beacons flying in formation.
It was just over the hotel. It's moved over. It's in a weird pattern.
The video posted on YouTube has been viewed more than 500,000 times.
We are intrigued by them because we cannot explain them.
Peter Davenport is the director of the National UFO Reporting Center. He says sightings are common in the Carolina skies.
We probably received 30 to 40,000 reports of sightings similar to what you saw over your city there.
These things are all jumping around.
So, will we ever find out the truth? The Pentagon program may have been disbanded in 2012, but there are indications that its work continues in secret, of course. There you go.
It's a secret.
There you have it.
Never know.
For decades, the government had basically said Area 51 does not exist. Now, the government has basically said, okay, yeah, technically, actually, it does exist. They said that in 2013, and now they're saying not only does Area 51 exist, but we've also spent millions of taxpayer dollars, something like $22 million, to investigate UFOs. It depends who you ask about Area 51. The government will say that it's where they used to test top secret planes, or where they used to test nuclear warheads and nuclear bombs. But for 70 years worth of people who believe in UFOs, it's a place where the government keeps all these secrets about aliens that have crash landed on Earth. One of the most out there conspiracy theories centers around Roswell, New Mexico, where I guess most people who believe in UFOs, or many people believe that an alien spacecraft crashed there and was discovered by a farmer. So what people believe is that this alien spacecraft, and maybe even the alien bodies that were in the spacecraft, were picked up by the government, taken to Area 51, and that the government has for years been dissecting these alien bodies and trying to reverse engineer the UFO, trying to figure out all kinds of things from teleportation to interstellar travel, even time travel. Filmmaker Ray Santilli put out this video that he said was a result of the Roswell crash, and it shows people in lab coats, purported scientists, dissecting alien bodies, and it's put out there as the Roswell autopsy. The problem with a lot of these conspiracy theories is that they haven't really stood up to the test of time, like the Roswell crash. That farmer did discover some things on his farmland, but what the Air Force later said was, yes, there was some top secret stuff going on. We were trying to spy on the Soviets, we were looking at their nuclear tests, but it wasn't aliens. And this Ray Santilli video is kind of debunked even more easily. He just said it was a fake. Here's what the government's admission means for these conspiracy theories. It's like pouring kerosene on these theories, right? Because now the government has admitted that Area 51 exists and is actually a thing. And they've said we've spent a whole lot of money trying to figure out if UFOs actually exist. And so anybody that has the smallest concept about maybe this is what happened with aliens now has at least a small kernel of truth that they can back it up on. They still have that kind of excuse for all the holes that end up in all these theories, which is that, well, the government's hiding, right? The government's been spending decades and all this money trying to hide all these unexplained things.
So you're saying aliens are real?
I neither confirm nor deny that aliens are real.
U.S. Navy pilots recently reported a number of UFO encounters that they say occurred regularly over the East Coast in the summers of 2014 and 2015. According to the New York Times, the objects are said to have looked like a sphere encasing a cube and had no visible engine or infrared exhaust plumes, but that they could reach 30,000 feet and hypersonic speeds. One of the pilots told the Times, "Keeping an aircraft in the air requires a significant amount of energy. With the speeds we observed, 12 hours in the air is 11 hours longer than we'd expect." An investigation was reportedly opened, but it did not find anything conclusive. Fox News notes earlier this year, the Navy issued new classified guidelines on how to report such instances.